Part 1. The moment the invisible starts to move. There's a moment quiet, invisible, when your entire life begins to shift, and you don't even notice it until much later. Maybe it happens as you sip your morning tea, or during a breath you didn't know was sacred. Maybe it's when you pause before answering a question, and something in you decides to respond from presence instead of pattern. That's the moment a new timeline is born. Not through drama, not through force, but through frequency. You don't step into a new reality by fighting the old one. You do it by aligning with a version of yourself that already exists in a higher coherence. That's what no one tells you. Reality doesn't change when you finally get what you want. Reality changes the moment you become the version of you who already has it. We are always shifting timelines, but most of us are doing it unconsciously. Every thought, every emotional reaction, every decision locks us into a vibrational corridor. You may think you're just choosing what to eat or how to respond to a text, but you're actually tuning your field to a specific version of the future. That future already exists. All of them do. The question is, which one are you feeding with your energy right now? The timeline of fear, scarcity, and hesitation, or the timeline of clarity, sovereignty, and flow? What you call reality is just the most dominant frequency you've practiced. And what you practice becomes your portal. The first step in effortless timeline shifting is to understand that state of being is everything. Your external world is a mirror reflecting your internal vibration. So if you want to shift your reality, you must shift your baseline frequency. That doesn't come from thinking positive thoughts. It doesn't come from desperate affirmations. It comes from becoming energetically congruent with the reality you desire. You don't fake it. You feel it. You embody it in your nervous system. You wake up and breathe as if you're already the person who lives that life. Because in the quantum field you are.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Begin each day by attuning your frequency before the world gets a chance to program you. That means no phone, no emails, no checking the news. Just you and your field. Sit with your spine aligned, feet grounded, and eyes gently closed. Ask yourself, what timeline am I tuning into today? Then feel into that version of yourself. Imagine how they breathe, how they speak, how they move. Anchor that feeling in your body, not in your mind. This is not visualization. This is vibrational entrainment. You're not pretending. You're remembering. Throughout the day, you'll be challenged. Triggers will come. Distractions will pull. Old patterns will try to reclaim you. That's not failure. That's feedback. Every time you feel yourself slipping into an old state, rushing, doubting, contracting, you pause. You breathe, and you recode the moment. Say to yourself, wait, what timeline am I feeding with this reaction? That one sentence, when used consistently, can collapse entire lifetimes of unconscious patterning. Because it returns you to your sovereign choice. And choice is the only real magic there is. Movement is another key. Your body is not just flesh, it's a frequency generator. The way you walk, the way you hold your shoulders, the way you breathe, these are all commands to the quantum field. So start moving like someone who trusts the unfolding. Walk slower. Breathe deeper. Speak with intentional pauses. This isn't performance, it's posture of power. You're rewiring your nervous system to hold more presence. And presence is the gateway to multidimensional navigation. Your language is also a timeline tool. Every word you speak either reinforces your current reality or opens the door to a new one. When you say things like "I'm stuck," "I'm trying," or "I don't know how," you're not just describing your experience, you're declaring it. So begin to speak as the version of you who knows, who trusts, who remembers. Practice saying, "I'm aligning," instead of "I'm struggling." Say, "I'm choosing," instead of "I'm confused." Your words are not casual. They are spells, and your life is listening. Timeline shifting also requires mastery of emotion, not suppression, not bypassing, but emotional fluency. The way you relate to your feelings determines which version of reality you inhabit. When fear arises, do you collapse? Or do you breathe and expand your capacity to hold it? When sadness comes, do you numb it? Or do you honor it as sacred intelligence? Emotion is energy in motion. If you don't process it, you stay locked in the same loop. But when you move it, you move timelines. One of the most overlooked practices is solitude, not loneliness, not escapism, but intentional disconnection from the collective noise. You must spend time daily just sitting in stillness, no agenda, no asking, no fixing, and just listening. Because your next shift isn't always something you do. Sometimes it's something you hear, a whisper from your higher self, a nudge from your future. But you can't hear it through the static of other people's opinions. Silence is not empty, it's full of information. Let me ask you a question that may shake you. What version of yourself are you loyal to, even though it no longer serves you? What identity are you rehearsing out of habit, obligation, or fear? Because as long as you keep showing up as the person you've always been, you will continue to live the life you've always had. Timeline shifting begins with telling the truth. The truth that you're allowed to outgrow what once felt like home. The truth that you don't owe your past self anything except evolution. A powerful tool I give my students is called identity scripting. Each morning, write from the perspective of the version of you who already lives in your desired timeline. Not about what you hope, but about what you remember. Write, "I remember when I used to wake up anxious," or "I remember when I didn't trust my intuition." This flips the subconscious. It tricks the mind into collapsing the time between now and then. And when the mind stops resisting, the field starts reorganizing. You must also master energetic boundaries, not just with people, but with frequencies. Certain music, conversations, environments, even foods carry embedded timelines. When you engage with anything that contracts your field, you are choosing density. That doesn't mean you live in a bubble. It means you become intentional. Ask yourself, does this interaction reinforce the version of me I'm becoming? If not, step back. Not from judgment, but from alignment. You don't need to fix or convince anyone. You just need to hold your frequency. Lastly, remember this. The most quantum thing you can do is relax. Because when you're tense, when you're forcing, when you're chasing, you're signaling to the field that you don't trust the timeline. But when you soften, when you breathe, when you laugh, even in the middle of the unknown, you open the portal. The universe doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to presence. You don't magnetize your desires by needing them. You magnetize them by becoming the version of you who no longer doubts they're inevitable. So I ask you now, what timeline are you rehearsing with your breath, your posture, your tone, your choices? Because whether you realize it or not, you are already practicing a reality. The only question is it the one your soul actually wants? Part 2. The mechanics of magnetic identity. Every timeline is governed by an identity. You are not just shifting into a new life, you are shifting into a new self. And that self is not something you discover. It is something you design. It already exists in the quantum field, waiting for your frequency to match it. That's why timeline shifting is never about chasing outcomes. It's about matching identities. The version of you who lives in deep peace, effortless abundance, radiant health, that version is not far away. It is here, vibrating just outside your current posture of being. And the moment you become a match for that identity, life rearranges itself with uncanny precision. So how do you consciously construct and embody a magnetic identity? You begin by becoming radically aware of the identities you're unconsciously performing. Most people don't realize they're in character the overachiever, the empath who always saves others, the victim of circumstance, the rebel who never belongs. These are not your essence. They are survival masks. They were crafted by your nervous system to navigate pain, rejection, and ancestral expectations. But they are not who you are. And the longer you keep rehearsing them, the longer you delay the timeline where you are free. To shift timelines, then you must first shift your internal allegiance. You must stop being loyal to the self that was built from wounding. And you must start showing up for the self that's encoded with vision. Each morning, ask yourself, who would I be if I remembered that I'm not here to survive, but to create? That question pierces the illusion. It shakes the scaffolding of the old identity. And it activates a deeper current, a version of you that already exists beyond the noise, beyond the fear, beyond the fear, beyond the story. Now let's talk about calibration. You cannot hold a new timeline with inconsistent energy. The field is always listening. So if you want to shift effortlessly, you must become unshakably consistent in your frequency. That means your thoughts, your breathing, your posture, your choices, your environment, everything must reflect the internal truth of your future self. You don't do this from pressure. You do this from devotion. A devotion to the timeline that's calling you. Devotion to the self that's already becoming. This is where daily rituals come in, but not as tasks. Not as spiritual checklists, as technologies of alignment. A ritual is not something you do. It's something you enter. When you light a candle, breathe deeply, say an invocation, or sit in stillness, you're not just calming the nervous system. You are signaling the field. You are saying, I remember. I choose. I align. And the field, which is intelligent and responsive, begins to move in your favor. That's not magic. That's mechanics. One of my favorite practices is what I call quantum morning encoding. Before the rest of the world touches your consciousness, you spend 10 to 15 minutes in frequency attunement. This is not about thinking. It's about feeling into the reality you're choosing. You close your eyes. You drop into your body. You visualize nothing. You simply feel your future self. How they breathe, what they believe, how they walk into a room, what they do when they feel fear. You let that identity merge with you. And when you open your eyes, you move through the day as if the shift has already occurred. This is not pretending, it's rehearsal. And all of reality is a mirror of what you rehearse most consistently. Think about it. Every time you repeat the story, "Things don't work out for me," you are rehearsing the identity of someone who is overlooked by life. Every time you say, "I'm not ready," you're rehearsing the identity of someone who denies destiny. And the field simply reflects that script, not because it's punishing you, but because it's obedient to your vibration. So ask yourself, what identity am I practicing today? Not what goals you're chasing, not what problems you need to solve, but who am I becoming in this breath, this step, this response? If you practice the identity of your future self with the same consistency you practice anxiety, shame, or self-doubt, how different would your life be in just 30 days? That's not a rhetorical question. That's a challenge. Because the only thing standing between you and the timeline you crave is the identity you refuse to surrender. Another key practice is energetic pattern disruption. When you feel stuck, it's not because your life is frozen, it's because your responses are predictable. You keep reacting the same way, at the same time, to the same stimulus. That's how timelines loop. So when you want to shift, don't just change your thoughts, change your sequence. If you always check your phone first thing in the morning, don't. If you always say yes when you mean no, stop. If you always avoid discomfort, lean in. These small disruptions ripple through the field and signal a new identity is being installed, one pattern at a time. Let me give you a question that will change your relationship with time. If I knew this version of me was temporary, how would I honor the transition? Most of us resist change because we think we are losing something. But what if you're not losing an identity, you're completing a contract? What if your anxiety, your confusion, your stagnation is not a problem but a signal that your current timeline is done with you? That it has nothing left to teach you? Would you still cling to it out of fear? Or would you bow in gratitude and step forward? This is why grief is often a doorway to timeline shifting. We think grief is about loss, but true grief is about release. It's about making space for the next version of you to land. You must be willing to grieve the identities that no longer fit. You must mourn the masks that once protected you. You must say goodbye to the roles that kept you safe but small. Because without grief, there is no growth. And without release, there is no rise. Now let's talk about vision. Vision is not fantasy. It's instruction. Your highest vision was not created by your ego. It was planted in you by your soul as a blueprint for alignment. So when you receive a vision of future self, an intuitive nudge, a dream that won't die, don't dismiss it. Honor it. Because that vision is your timeline trying to speak to you. It's not asking you to figure out how. It's asking you to become the one who's ready to receive it. That's why aligned action is essential. Not hustle, not strategy, but action that matches the energy of the timeline. When you are calm, clear, and coherent, the next step is obvious. It might be a phone call, a journal entry, a decision to rest, a conversation you've been avoiding. These actions are not random. They are frequency keys. They unlock sequences that were dormant. And when activated, they accelerate your shift. But without integrity, no shift will sustain. Integrity is not about morality. It's about energetic coherence. Are your words aligned with your truth? Are your habits aligned with your vision? Are your standards aligned with your worth? Every time you compromise your integrity, you step out of alignment with your chosen timeline. Not because you're punished, but because you're out of resonance. So come back, again and again, not to perfection, but to presence. Because presence is the home of all timelines. Let me ask you one more question before we continue. If the version of you you're becoming could speak to you now, what would they say? Would they tell you to wait until you're ready? Would they beg you to stay in fear? Or would they reach across time and whisper, I'm already here. Just become me. Part 3. The field responds when you do. There comes a moment on the journey when you stop asking, how do I shift? And start living as if the shift already happened. This is when the field begins to respond with precision. Not because you've mastered manifestation, not because you've hacked the universe, but because you finally surrendered to who you actually are. You're no longer performing the role of the wounded one, the seeker, the skeptic, the almost there. You're showing up as the one who remembers. And the moment you live from that memory, the timelines rearrange themselves around you. Now we enter the realm of stabilization. Shifting a timeline is one thing. Holding it, that's the real art. Because the old timeline will try to call you back. Not out of malice, but out of momentum. It shows up as doubt, as delay, as familiar triggers. If you mistake this for failure, you'll slip back into the loop. But if you see it for what it is, a test of identity, you'll smile, you'll breathe, and you'll recommit. Because now you know the frequency must come first. No matter what the external shows, reality is catching up. Stay in character. The key to holding a new timeline is devotion to daily self-remembering. That means no more casual energy hygiene, no more occasional presence. You must become ritualistic with your awareness. Not rigid, not obsessive, but devoted. Because the field doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you are. So every day you ask, am I remembering my blueprint? Or am I reacting from the past? That one question, repeated daily, will calibrate you faster than any hack or technique, because it cuts through the noise. And here's the truth. Holding a new timeline often requires letting go of approval. You can't stabilize a higher frequency while still needing permission from people who only know your lower self. They will misread your peace as distance, your clarity as arrogance, your new boundaries as betrayal. That's okay. They are not rejecting you. They are responding to the absence of the version they were bonded to. And that version is gone. Don't resurrect them to keep others comfortable. You are not here to be digestible. You are here to be aligned. One of the most stabilizing practices is timeline embodiment through environment. You must surround yourself with symbols that reflect your chosen frequency. That can mean changing your space, clearing clutter, dressing as your future self, updating your digital world, curating your inputs. Every object, sound, scent, and texture carries a vibration. You're either reinforcing your old timeline or amplifying the new one. There is no neutral. So look around and ask, does this space reflect who I've become or who I'm afraid to leave behind? Breathwork is another non-negotiable. Not because it's trendy, but because breath is the bridge between timelines. Your breath is the remote control of your nervous system, and your nervous system is the gatekeeper of your frequency. If you are breathing shallow, reactive, and fast, you are anchoring survival timelines. When you breathe deeply, slowly, and consciously, you signal safety. And from safety, expansion becomes possible. That's how you shift, not by pushing, but by regulating. You become the one who can hold more light without fracturing. Let's talk about relationships and resonance. When you shift timelines, your relationships will either rise with you or fall away. That is not cruelty. That is clarity. You are no longer a vibrational match for dynamics rooted in chaos, codependency, or unconsciousness. If you try to hold on to everyone, you dilute your field. You become split, and a split signal creates static timelines. So love them, honor them, and release them if necessary. You are not abandoning anyone. You are simply choosing your evolution. And from that clarity, new relationships will find you ones that match your current frequency, not your former fear. Another practice, often overlooked, is speaking only from your timeline. That means you stop narrating the old story. You stop explaining your pain. You stop defending your doubt. This doesn't mean you lie. It means you liberate. You speak from the now, not from the wound. You say, I trust. You say, I'm guided. You say, I'm already there. And if someone asks, but how? You smile and say, it's already happening. That's not delusion. That's dimensional fluency. You're speaking from the vibration before the manifestation. And that is what draws it in. Let me give you something radical. There's no such thing as being off track. There is only alignment or instruction. When things fall apart, it's not because you failed. It's because your current timeline has completed its contract with you. That argument, that rejection, that job loss, that illness, it's not punishment. It's data. It's the field saying, this version of you has expired. Upgrade required. So instead of falling into despair, fall into awareness. Ask, what timeline is this pain pulling me into? And then choose again. One of the most powerful daily practices is energetic forecasting. Sit in stillness and connect with the version of you who exists 6 months ahead, 1 year ahead, 5 years ahead. Ask them, what did you stop doing to become me? What did you start doing that changed everything? Listen, don't analyze. Their answers may come as images, feelings, or direct knowing. Write them down. These are not fantasies. These are instructions. Your future self already exists, and they are trying to get your attention. The question is, are you still too loyal to the present to hear them? Let's also speak of the void. Every timeline shift includes a period of emptiness. This is when the old reality is dissolving, but the new one hasn't fully arrived. Most people panic here. They think they've done something wrong. But the void is not failure. It's recalibration. It is sacred space. It's the field asking, can you hold the unknown without collapsing into the familiar? If you can, you will activate timelines beyond what your mind could ever plan. So breathe in the void, dance in the void, celebrate the blank canvas. Because something extraordinary is organizing itself behind the silence. Now I will tell you the final truth. The ultimate timeline shift is not about money, love, or status. It's about remembrance. It's when you stop being the one who seeks and become the one who remembers they were always it. You remember that there is no separation between you and Source, no barrier between you and your future, no distance between your desire and its arrival. You were never meant to chase. You were meant to align. And once you remember that, there is nothing left to force. There is only allowing. Let me ask you one final question. What would happen if you stopped waiting for signs and decided that you are the signal? What would shift if you stopped asking for proof and chose to be the proof? That is how timelines move, not when you beg, but when you become. And when you become, the field responds. Not slowly, not eventually, but immediately.